What is up, fellow nerds, and welcome back to the Dapper Snapper Gaming channel, and welcome back to How Do I Want to Do This. This is our series where we take a look at all playable options available to players in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, then we rank them on a scale of 1 to 10 and either build them or fix them depending on how they rank. Now today we are starting our talks on the OG Ranger, the Hunter Ranger, originally brought to us in the PHB, and I'm excited to talk about this one. This one obviously has been around for forever, and so a lot of people are really familiar with it, but sometimes this one tends to fly under the radar when you look at some of the newer options. And so does this one still hold up after all this time, or has it kind of fallen off? We'll have to find that out today, but before we do, make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe if you haven't already. As you can see, most people who watch this channel are not subscribed, so please don't be one of those people. Help us to reach our goal of 4,000 by the end of this year. I know we can do it. We are really close to 3,500 as it is. We'll probably be there within the next week or two. And so, you know, with your support, maybe we have a big push in December. Who knows? We could definitely get there. So of course, make sure you also click the bell so you're notified when new videos are uploaded, and share the video with your friends. First of all, I want to say thank you to all the support on the channel here recently. You all have been absolutely amazing watching the videos, liking them, leaving me comments, all that stuff. Again, leave me a comment on this video. I always enjoy reading your comments, and let me know what you think about this subclass, how it compares to others, how you would change it if you think that it's not as good as what I rank it, or if you think it's better than what I rank it, or however. Just let me know. I love reading your comments and responding to those. It's a lot of fun. This video has been delayed by a day, so I apologize for that. I was away from my home this entire last week between like 6:30 a.m. and 11 p.m. every day for the entire week, Monday to Sunday. And so it's been a rough week. So obviously I've had to get caught back up on my recordings, but we are here. So again, I really appreciate you. Thank you for being here and watching. Of course, consider becoming a member for all of my build guides and all that good stuff. With all that out of the way, let's take a look at the Hunter. So like I said in the intro, the Hunter has been around for a long time, right? One of the original Rangers. And so with that, you come with some good and some bad, right? We've looked at a lot of different subclasses from the PHB that are really, really good. And I'll link one up in the icon above. And there's also ones that are really, really bad. First one that comes to my mind is, of course, several of the monks. Yeah, I'll link that up there too if you want to see how I fixed a few of those. But basically, you get kind of a mixed bag with the PHB kind of stuff, right? Because they were still trying to figure out how to balance everything, how they wanted everything to work in the rules. There weren't any supplements to the rules at the time from like Xanathar's and Tasha's and that kind of thing. So they were really kind of going into this with some playtesting, but ultimately when you put something out like this, it's not going to be fully playtested. So we're just gonna have to see. Some of these have come out completely broken and busted and insane, and some of these have come out so bad that they are almost unplayable. So we're gonna have to see just where the Hunter ends up today. Let's do it. So the Hunter is very unique in that every time that we would get a subclass feature, we have basically a branching choice, right? It's similar kind of to the Totem Warrior Barbarian, which is up in the icon above. Speaking of one that's busted off rip. But basically you get to choose one of 2 or 3 features that you can pick up as a ranger at each of your levels at 3, 7, 11, and 15. And so obviously with that, we're looking at how to rank a choice of 3 or 2 in some cases features at each level. So that does make ranking a little bit difficult, but you'll see what I mean. Let's take a look at level 3. We get Hunter's Prey right off rip here, and of course there are 3 options. Number 1 is Colossus Slayer. With this, whenever we hit a creature with a weapon attack, the creature takes 1d8 extra damage if it is below its hit point maximum, and you can only do that once per turn. Next, we could choose Giant Killer. When a creature that is large or larger within 5 feet of us either hits or misses us with an attack, we can use a reaction to immediately make an attack on that creature. Then finally, we could also choose Horde Breaker. So once per turn when we make an attack, we can make another attack with the same weapon against a different creature that is within 5 feet of the original target that we made that first attack against. So obviously these are at varying levels of viable, right? And so let's take a look at each of these kind of in depth and see where we land, and we'll kind of give an overall score, right? So Colossus Slayer, that one's pretty good, right? I mean, most of the time, 95% of the time, if not more, you are going to be attacking a creature that has less than its maximum HP, right? So when you hit a creature with that weapon attack, the creature takes an additional 1d8 damage. That's free, right? That's extra damage for free. I love that. So you can, once you have extra attack here in 2 levels, you can wait to delay this to the second one if the creature was at full health when you attacked it originally, and then just, you know, deal the extra damage right then. So that's going to be applicable almost 100% of the time, right? So that's almost always going to be a thing. Not bad at all. Giant Killer's kind of interesting because you're limited in the size of the creature, and it has to be in melee. So if a large creature is a ranged character, doesn't matter. So like a dragon that has used a breath weapon and you're not near it, nope, this does not work. So that's not great. This also does pigeonhole you into being a melee character, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but rangers can do both and they like the flexibility. So that does kind of drive you in one direction there. And then finally, Horde Breaker, you know, you get to make an additional attack, but that's only as long as another creature standing within 5 feet of your target. So that's also pretty limiting and probably isn't going to come up all that much. So if we're looking at all of these, Colossus Slayer is clearly the best by quite a bit, right? Will the others come up? Maybe, but they're not going to be nearly as applicable as Colossus Slayer is, or at the very least, they're not going to be nearly as consistent. So I probably would choose Colossus Slayer here almost every time. And that's going to be part of the issue with this subclass, is that there are clear winners, and then the others just kind of don't apply. And that's kind of tough, right? Like going back to when I was talking about the Totem Warrior, right? I kind of mentioned that here a few minutes ago, but the Totem Warrior, pretty much all of the options are viable. Yes, they vary to a degree. And of course, Bear is insane at level 3, but it's not to say that Eagle or Wolf are bad by any means. They're both very, very good. And there's a reason why I gave that feature a 10 out of 10, because all of those options are great. So I can't say the same about this. And that's what's tough, right? It does give you options, but once you pick, you're locked in. You don't get to change it later. And it's just kind of limiting in that way. So if I was just looking at Colossus Slayer, which is our best case scenario, that's all we get at level 3, where we have other rangers that are getting so much more, right? So much more, rather than 1d8 once per turn. So that is very disappointing compared to the others. For that reason, I've got to give this a 6 out of 10. It's fine, like it will come up, but ultimately when you look at it in comparison to other rangers, especially just at level 3, it's rather disappointing in the grand scheme. Next up, level 7, we get defensive tactics. And again, we get 3 different options that we can choose from. First choice, we have Escape the Horde, and this gives every creature disadvantage against opportunity attacks against us. Could be useful. Next, multi-attack defense. When a creature hits you with an attack, you gain a +4 bonus to AC against all subsequent attacks made by that creature for the rest of the turn. Then finally, Steel Will, you have advantage on saving throws against being frightened. Okay, so this one is a little bit more involved than the level 3 feature, I think, at least to me. So when you look at Escape the Horde, opportunity attacks being made against you have disadvantage. Yes, that's good, but at the same time, do you want to be taking the risk and forcing opportunity attacks all the time, right? Especially when you could just take a couple levels rogue and disengage as a bonus action. I don't know that it's worth that necessarily. Multi-attack defense is even worse, because if a creature does not have multi-attack, then this doesn't happen. And so if you're fighting a bunch of grunts, this is never going to come up, right? Now, it does say when a creature hits you with an attack, you gain a +4 bonus to AC against all subsequent attacks made by that creature. It doesn't necessarily say that that only happens once per turn. So if a creature made like 4 attacks against you, Would it continue adding 4 each attack? I don't know. I've never heard an argument against that. And by the way that this is worded, you know, I don't think that's rules as intended, but I do think that that could be interesting, where you end up with an AC like in the 40s if they had enough attacks. I don't know. We just that's one thing that's interesting. But again, I don't think that this is going to be nearly as applicable as what it sounds. And finally, Steel Will, advantage against being frightened. Now that's pretty applicable, especially at level 7. We've talked about this with other rangers that get something like this, right? But there are also other rangers that get advantage on charm and frighten. This one is just frighten, and it's a choice, right? So I don't think that this is all that great overall. I think that overall these 3 are just a little disappointing, and as soon as you take one, you're gonna wish you had another one, and then you can't switch. So that's kind of tough. That's kind of tough for me. So with all that in mind, which one do I think is the best? I would say Steel Will is probably the best one, but like I said, there are other rangers that have gotten something like that, but even better. And so it just makes this look not good. So again, I've got to give this a 6 out of 10. Having advantage against Frighten is good, but it's not great, and it's not as good as what some others get as well. You know, opportunity attacks at disadvantage, I don't know that I want to be forcing that all that much. You know, in order to use this feature, you have to risk being hit by an attack. I don't know that I want that. So I just don't think that it's going to come up nearly as much as what it sounds, or at least if it does come up, you're putting yourself in a rough position. At level 11, we get multi-attack, and this is technically a buff to extra attack, which, as you know, extra attack always gets a 10 out of 10 in my book. So buffing that further, does that make this an automatic 10 out of 10? We'll just have to see. Now we only get 2 options here, but we have one that's for melee and one that is for range. So let's take a look at those. For our ranged option, we have volley. And so with this, we can use our action to make a ranged attack against any number of creatures. Any number of creatures. That's a lot of creatures, potentially. Within 10 feet of a point that we can see, we must have ammunition, and as normal, we make a separate attack for each target. For the melee side, we have whirlwind attack. You can use your action to make melee attacks against any number of creatures within 5 feet of you, with a separate attack roll, of course, for each target. Now, this is where the hunter kind of goes, you know, in a different direction, right? We've given low rankings to the first 2. This is completely different and way better. So with volley, you choose a point within 10 feet of that point, you can make as many attacks as you possibly can in order to hit all the creatures that are within that range. That could potentially be a ton of creatures, right? And that's a lot of attacks. So best case scenario, you're dealing a lot of damage all around, spread around to a bunch of different creatures. Could be huge. And then for whirlwind attack, it's the same thing. When you look at all of the melee, if you're completely surrounded, then you can make an attack against every single creature that is surrounding you, regardless of how many attacks you normally would be able to make. So how good is this really? I do think that volley comes out ahead of whirlwind attack, because volley means that you are not in danger. That means that you are not necessarily the one standing right in the middle of a bunch of different creatures. Now, at the same time, you also have to consider how cover works. And so if you choose a point and you are just shooting straight at a bunch of characters, whether it's with a firearm, whether it's with a bow and arrow or crossbow or whatever it is, if you're trying to hit a creature that is behind another creature, then that creature will have cover, and there is nothing in this that says that that is blocked or changed, right? So you are still going to have to deal with that, but you still get to make a bunch of attacks. And as long as you have ammunition and you're not worried about the loading property, which by level 11, I'm sure you're ignoring the loading property, then you just go crazy, right? So it's good. It's really good. Whirlwind attack is good, but you've got to be in a really bad spot for this to be applicable. And that's why I don't like it as much. You have to be completely surrounded to get the most out of this. And at that point, you're probably just going to die anyway. So you've used your attack, so you can't disengage unless you took rogue levels. And so you make one attack against everybody. And so unless your DM is using like the 1 HP rules for minions, and you're surrounded by just minions and you hit all your attacks, unless that happens, you're probably going to go down anyway. So that's kind of table dependent, at least the way that I see that. So that could be interesting. But at the same time, with volley, we talked about with a bunch of these other features, they're pretty much focused on being in melee, right? Colossus Slayer, not so much. That's just a weapon attack, so that's not necessarily tied. But if you go with Escape the Horde, you probably would rather not be up in somebody's face, and so that's kind of interesting. So I don't know. I just don't know that these are as good as some of the other stuff we've gotten here. Are they great? Absolutely. They're the best features we've seen so far, and they get a 9 out of 10. They're very, very good. But ultimately, I do think that there are some restrictions on them, and the position that you have to put yourself in order to use them could lead to something dangerous, and that's why I can't give them a perfect score. Finally, at level 15, we get Superior Hunter's Defense, and this is one more defensive feature in order to keep us around a little bit longer. So we get 3 options. We're back to 3. We had 2 for that last one, but we're back to 3, which is pretty cool. And 2 of these are going to look very familiar to you if you are familiar with the Rogue class, and then one of them is new. So let's take a look at that. Number 1, we could get Evasion. Now, Evasion is normally, of course, part of the Rogue kit at level 7. So we're level 15. Rogues get this at level 7. So we're very much behind. So when we are subjected to an effect that allows you to make a dexterity saving throw, to take half damage, you take none instead, or if you fail to save, you take half damage. Next, we have Uncanny Dodge, which again comes from the Rogue kit, except even earlier at level 5. 10 levels before this one. When an attacker that you can see hits you with an attack, you can use your reaction to take half damage instead. Then finally, we have something new, and that is Stand Against the Tide. So when a hostile creature misses you with a melee attack, you can use your reaction to force that creature to repeat the same attack against another creature other than itself. So obviously, looking at these, we can tell that Stand Against the Tide is kind of trash, right? Because again, that is focused on 2 creatures being next to each other. And this also means that it has to be a melee creature. So you have to be in somebody's face, and it has to have somebody right next to it that you want it to attack instead. It also has to miss you. So you've got to make sure you've got a high enough AC, which shouldn't be the worst if you've got some like studded leather armor, maybe some magical studded leather by this time since level 15, and you've got a really good dexterity probably maxed out. So I mean, your AC should be really good, but I still think that Stand Against the Tide is bad. I don't think it's worth it ever to take that. So let's take a look at the other 2. The other 2 are great. They are staples of the Rogue kit, but they came 8 and 10 levels earlier for the Rogue. For every rogue, they get both. This is level 15, and you have to choose one or the other. So what is stopping me from going to level 11 in Ranger and then just going to Rogue and just taking everything? Yeah, it's 1 extra level in order to pick up Uncanny Dodge, but then I can get Evasion and have both of them for 2 more levels. I don't see why I don't do that. I don't see what the draw of this would be for me to not jump ship at level 12 in order to have both Evasion and Uncanny Dodge and not have to choose. That's my issue with this, is that you've got these features that you're borrowing, which is cool, right? It's cool to see this on a Ranger, but you've got it so late that by this point you're better off going to Rogue and getting it from the main source. So that's not good. That's not good. However, the features themselves are good. Uncanny Dodge and Evasion are both great. And I love that they are here on a Ranger kit, but I also want both, like what the Rogue does. So I've got to put something in the middle here, and I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10. The features are good, but I want both of them. I don't want to have to choose, but I would much rather just multi-class into Rogue and get all the goodies there rather than having to rely on only getting one or the other with 15 levels in Ranger. With all of that, where does the Hunter land? This one has been all over the place. This has been a bit of a rough one. I definitely can see why people like it, but I also can see why people think that it's not that great. To me, the only like standout feature, the only impressive feature is multi-attack at level 11. That is the only feature that really stands out to me. Everything else is rather mediocre. And you know that whenever I'm ranking these, at least if you've been on the channel for any length of time, that I do put less weight into the higher level features than I do the lower level ones, because I'm fully aware that, you know, you're playing Curse of Strahd, you're going to level 10. You're never even going to see multi-attack. So I'm looking at what by and large most players are going to be dealing with. And that's the other problem, right? Most people are not going to make it to level 15. The vast majority, rather, are not going to make it to level 15 and even get the chance to choose between evasion and uncanny dodge. Whereas the rogue had it in most situations, right? Most campaigns make it to level 5. A good number of them make it to level 7. And so I just don't see the big picture with that. So that's not great. Multi-attack, of course, it comes so late that doesn't help out. So I've got to really look at the early ones as my main point of a baseline of where to rank this. And obviously that didn't go so well. So this subclass definitely is a little rough and was not fully baked when it came out of the oven. So with that, where do I rank it? The reason why it's so important is because the way that I do my scale system is that a 6 is a fail and I have to make a fix. If I give it a 7, then I think it's okay and we build one instead. And that's kind of tough, right? I do think that this teeters at around the 6.5 mark. And so I think that I could see it going either way. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give this a 6. I think that it's just not quite there. I think it becomes good too late. I think it just becomes good a little bit too late. So unfortunately, I do think that it does fail. If you will let me know in the comments that you want to see it though, I will do a build guide for this eventually on the base version. Or if you want to see a build guide with my revamped version, let me know that as well in the comments. But you have to comment if you want me to, you know, take your idea, because I don't know what you want. So definitely hit me up. But for now, we're going to say that this is a fail and we're going to have to rebuild it and revamp it for later this week. So that is going to be interesting. So thank you all again so much for watching. That's all I have for you for today. Later this week, we're going to be fixing this. And then of course on Saturday, we've got our week 7 battle for the UNPL Pokemon Draft League. Please check that out. I put a ton of work into those videos. I'm now a commissioner of that league, so I'm like part owner. It's a ton of fun, fantasy football, but for Pokemon, it's great. So yeah, make sure to check all of that out. I really appreciate you guys. Until next time, stay safe out there, stay healthy. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.